Folks, I've got a confession to make. I was wrong, after all, to suspect Scotland's Crown Office. It turns out they had every reason to suppress Alex Salmond's evidence. You see, this morning I saw the front page of the Scottish Daily Mail, Thursday, February the 25th, 2021, and it says, "Outrage after Lord Chiefs censor Salmond inquiry evidence." Main headline, "Scotland run like, quote, a tin pot dictatorship." And right there on the front page, we get some constitutional detail, unusual for the front page of a mid-market newspaper. It says, in an extraordinary development, Lord Advocate, that's head of the Crown Office, Lord Advocate James Wolfe, QC, that's Queen's Counsel, who also holds a cabinet position, was hauled before Parliament to explain why his Crown Office had interfered in the affairs of state. But clearly the Daily Mail's wrong about this. We just need to go to the Lord Advocate's own evidence in answering questions in the Scottish Parliament yesterday, the 24th of February. He spoke for 8 minutes, link attached to this video, and at 2.5 minutes into that, he made himself quite clear. He said, "Can I say that fundamentally what's at issue here is an order by the High Court handed down to protect the anonymity of complainers. The Crown's sole interest in this matter is to secure respect for that court order." In fact, he repeats himself. He says, the Crown's sole interest in this matter, sole interest, is to secure respect for that court order. And Lord Advocate Wolfe goes on, it, that's his Crown Office, it has not sought and will not seek to limit the evidence which the committee in Parliament may have available to it. Well, there we go. That seems straightforward enough, doesn't it? The Crown Office's position was, in writing these unprecedented threatening letters to all and sundry, Alex Salmond, journalists, parliamentarians even, you will be in criminal contempt of a court order if you talk about the whole of Salmond's submitted evidence and the others submitted on behalf of him. The whole intent was to protect the anonymity of complainants. As Craig Murray has previously blogged, the refrain at the Crown Office was that little innocuous bits of detail could add up to jigsaw identification of these vulnerable ladies. Certainly that's the position that BBC Scotland is still taking on the matter. Well, here comes the confession then. We've now been able to see which bits of Alex Salmond evidence, and this is specifically Alex Salmond's evidence on the ministerial code, because he submitted several pieces of evidence to the Fabiani Committee of the Scottish Parliament, which bits were suppressed. We can do this, you see, because the whole of Mr. Salmond's evidence went up on the Scottish Parliament's website, and then after a hasty call from the Crown Office, bits were taken out of it. But the trouble is, as Craig Murray has noted in his blog, and as others have published, including The Spectator, the whole of the evidence is still available on archive.org and reblogged by Craig Murray and others. So now we can be beyond doubt that Lord Advocate James Wolfe was acting, or rather his people, because he protests he had nothing to do with it and it was not at all political, it was a prosecutorial decision under him. We can see exactly how he was acting to protect the anonymity of these ladies. As I read to you now just the paragraphs which were suppressed, the paragraphs that are blanked out, if you look at the Scottish Parliament hosted upload of Mr. Salmond's evidence after the Crown Office's call, you can clearly see that these redactions were made to protect the anonymity of these poor ladies. So here goes. Helpfully put in bold type on Craig Murray's blog, I'm going to read out just the paragraphs which were suppressed. Before I do, let's remind ourselves again what the Lord Advocate said yesterday in Parliament. It's an order by the High Court which is at issue, handed down to protect the anonymity of complainers. The Crown's sole interest in this matter, sole interest, is to secure respect for that court order. It has not sought and will not seek to limit the evidence which the committee may have available to it. Here goes then. Alex Salmond's evidence, the suppressed paragraphs. 12. I was contacted by phone on or around the 9th of March 2018 and further the following week by Jeff Aberdeen, my former Chief of Staff, Alex Salmond's former Chief of Staff. The purpose of the contact was to tell me about meetings he had held with the First Minister's Chief of Staff, Liz Lloyd, at her request. That is, of course, Nicola Sturgeon's Chief of Staff, Liz Lloyd. In the second of these meetings, paragraph 13, she had informed him that she was aware of 2 complaints concerning me, Alex Salmond, under a new complaints process introduced to include former ministers. She named one of the complainers to him. At that stage, I did not know the identity of the other complainer. Next redacted section. Paragraph 16. Mr. Aberdeen had been asked by Mrs. Lloyd to be her contact with me, and they jointly arranged a meeting with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, in the Scottish Parliament on the 29th of March 2018. This meeting was for the purpose of discussing the complaints, and thereafter arranging a direct meeting between myself and the First Minister, a Salmond-Sturgeon meeting. There was never the slightest doubt what the meeting was about. Any suggestion by Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, to the Scottish Parliament, as made on the 8th of October 2020, that the meeting was fleeting or opportunistic, in quotes, is simply untrue. It was agreed on the 29th of March 2018 at the meeting in the Scottish Parliament, attended by Aberdeen and the First Minister and another individual, that the meeting between myself and the First Minister would take place on the 2nd of April at her home near Glasgow. Self-evidently, only the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, could issue that invitation to her private home. Paragraph 17. In attendance at the meeting on the 2nd of April 2018 were Mr. Aberdeen, Mr. Hamilton, Mrs. Lloyd and myself. The First Minister and I, Nicola Sturgeon and Salmond, met privately, and then there was a general discussion with all 5 of us. My purpose was to alert the First Minister to the illegality of the process, not being aware at that time of her involvement in it, and to seek an intervention from the First Minister to secure a mediation process to resolve the complaints. Next redacted paragraph is 30. The First Minister told Parliament, see official report of the 8th, 10th and 17th of January 2019, that she first learned of the complaints against me when I visited her home on the 2nd of April 2018. That is untrue and is a breach of the Ministerial Code. The evidence from Mr. Aberdeen that he personally discussed the existence of the complaints and summarised the substance of the complaints with the First Minister in a pre-arranged meeting in Parliament on the 29th of March 2018, arranged for that specific purpose, cannot be reconciled with the position of the First Minister to Parliament. The fact that Mr. Aberdeen learned of these complaints in early March 2018 from the Chief of Staff to the First Minister, who thereafter arranged for the meeting between Mr. Aberdeen and the First Minister on the 29th of March to discuss them, is supported by his sharing that information contemporaneously, meaning at the time, with myself, Kevin Prinkle and Duncan Hamilton, advocate. There we are. Those are the paragraphs that the Crown Office used the threat of criminal prosecution to get removed from what went up on the website of the Scottish Parliament. Can you see now that I was completely wrong-headed to suspect that the Crown Office had any political motives or skullduggery here? Clearly, all of this was to protect the anonymity of the complainants who are so ungallantly named and identified in what I've just read out to you. Clearly, the paragraphs I've just read out to you have nothing at all to do with Nicola Sturgeon's personal culpability in the matter. Just to look at the comments posted underneath Wings Over Scotland's upload of the Lord Advocate's 8 minutes in Parliament yesterday, I see Kirk's71 writes, "Did wee Nick write his wee speech too?" This is a shocking abuse of power. If she will go this far to shut people up, then what are her plans for the citizens of Scotland? Another commenter, B. Neon, is responding to remarks by Tom Arthur, a Scottish National Party MSP, made at 7 minutes in the upload, where Tom Arthur MSP says, "Can I ask the Lord Advocate to confirm that previous Lord Advocates, through devolution, have all been members of Cabinet, and in fact can the Lord Advocate confirm that it has always been thus? It was the same when Donald Dewar was First Minister, when Henry McLeish was the First Minister, when Jack McConnell was First Minister, and when Alex Salmond was the First Minister. And furthermore," adds Tom Arthur, "can the Lord Advocate confirm that, entirely separate from his Cabinet role, the Lord Advocate fills a distinct and independent prosecutorial function as head of the Crown Office?" In response to this question, it is in response to this that B. Neon comments, "The last speaker, Mr. Arthur, an SNP MSP, is telling lies. Alex Salmond separated both posts. Sturgeon reinstated them." That is, merged them together again, the political and the prosecutorial. But all irony aside, why has the Crown Office taken such ludicrous, egregiously corrupt steps? Well, there's commentary just in by Alistair Bonington, Nicola Sturgeon's former law professor at Glasgow University, who writes the following. "To lawyers, the position of the Crown Office is the most worrying element in this farce. It has refused to allow the inquiry access to many seemingly crucial documents from the criminal trial. Its legal basis for doing so, Section 163 of the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Act 2010, is highly doubtful. Any material gathered for the trial which proves or disproves Mr. Salmond's claims of a conspiracy must be made available to the inquiry. It may be highly relevant. We need to know the truth about this. There is also the matter of the highly peculiar Crown warning email of Monday night to the Inquiry Committee, to Parliament that is. The Crown," continues Alistair Bonington, "does not normally send out warning emails about contempt of court orders." What he's saying is usually it's your own bad luck if you decide to press ahead unwisely with such things, but in this case the Crown Office is saying, "Oi, don't do it." Mr. Bonington continues, "I worked with newspapers, radio and television for many years, and this sort of warning is almost unknown. But in this instance, the Salmond affair, the Crown has done this twice, despite the Scottish Parliament having its own employed lawyers available to advise. It's pretty difficult to come to any conclusion other than that these warnings were initiated from within Team Sturgeon." Putting matters a little more plainly is Andrew Neil in the Daily Mail today, Thursday, February 25th, 2021, who points out the following about this sham of a threat. "Salmond cannot now be questioned about these bits of his submission, nor can Sturgeon when she appears, nor can the inquiry take into account anything it has not published when coming to its conclusions. So, job done for the Sturgeon camp. The lengths to which they have gone to redact and censor would shame North Korea." So, of course, what Andrew Neil is pointing out here is that even though The Spectator, the Daily Mail, Craig Murray, UK column, Wings Over Scotland, you name it, have published the full evidence, because the Scottish Parliament and its inquiry committee have taken out the paragraphs I've just read to you, they don't exist for the inquiry. So anytime Salmond or any of his former people, or Sturgeon or any of her current or former people are called back to talk about their testimonies, they can't be asked what they meant in those paragraphs because they don't exist to the inquiry. Well done, Crown Office.